right, so very warm welcome to everyone, wherever you're dialing into from around the world. If it's South Africa, or Africa, for me it's 5 o'clock. For Dave and Mark, I think you're on the West Coast, so I'm guessing it's very early, 7 a.m. or so. And for everyone else, I hope that it's not too much of a crazy time. Just before we get started and we do the introductions, I just want to welcome everyone that's joining and encourage you to ask questions. I think it gets very boring when I'm moderating and just being the only person that's putting questions out there. It becomes very Colin Isles specific. I've got a huge number of things I want to learn about what growth units actually are, but the call's for you. So do post your questions and we'll try to get to as many of them as possible. And I dare say, I'm not promising this, but I dare say good questions will carry over and try to get Mark and Dave to answer directly if we run out of time. So with that, we've got a lot to cram in over the next 55 or so minutes. Mark, Dave, welcome.
Thank you, Colin. Lovely to be here. Excited to have this chat with you today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Colin.
Right, why don't we just start with a quick intro? I could read your bios, but that's really boring. I think it's much more interesting to hear it from the source. Dave, you're a Silicon Valley, you're a legacy in Silicon Valley, which is a nice way of saying you've been around there for a long time. Tell us your backstory.
Sure. First of all, thanks for joining, everybody, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of us, all of you joining the call. I think it's mostly good afternoon and good evening. I'm Dave Blakely, Executive Vice President with Mach 49, and I've been around since the beginning. And my story is I am an electrical engineer by training who joined a couple of startups and got fascinated by both how my work from tech startups could be applied in large companies to help them grow in new ways, and also how emerging technology, leading edge technology in Silicon Valley could be used by organizations everywhere in the world to help them to thrive. So that's me. Again, great to meet everybody.
Awesome. And Mark, what's your backstory?
Great. So lovely to be here. Such an honor to speak to lots of folks from Africa and all over the world. Thank you for joining us. Mark Simoncelli, I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Mach 49. I'm based here in Southern California. Started my career back in the day. I was actually at Rhodes University, proudly a rodent, and then went into technology implementation. So started working at Accenture, got lots of scars on lots of ERPs and banks and insurance companies across the African continent and globally. And then really this love affair started with value creation and what that means in terms of venture building and venture investing. And then found my way to Mach 49 4.5 years ago. And since then, we've been maniacally focused on, building and launching exciting new ventures. So yeah, just a delight to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
I love that word, maniacally. I think that's not used enough. I like that. I'm going to use that. I'll try to use that again in this call. Let's do it now, actually, Dave. This maniacal focus. What exactly is it that Mach 49 maniacally focuses on?
So here's what we, in our manic way, here's what we focus on. All of us know that helping organizations to grow and thrive is central. And Mach 49 was really founded on an observation that large organizations really were limited to 3 channels of growth, and they're important channels. Everyone who's joining us is familiar with these. There's incremental release of new products and services with existing new product introduction methods. There's merging with or acquiring other organizations, and there's bringing in vendors and sort of grinding them down to build something new for you. And those are all valid ways to grow. But what we believe, and the reason that my colleagues and I started the business, is we believe that large corporations can grow in 2 really important but underused ways. The first is by taking a page from the startup playbook, the unicorn startup playbook, and creating and building and launching ventures from inside a company using a lot of the methods you see with companies like Uber or Palantir that grow to an extraordinary unicorn scale very quickly. And the second thing we believe is that through venture investing, identifying important initiatives inside a large company and making minority equity investments, often in tech startups, you can drive growth and drive a lot of your important initiatives forward. So a lot of the way Mark and I spend our time is by helping companies with venture building and venture investing. We also help a bit with venture strategy, and we help grow capabilities all across these organizations for these new styles of growth. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, it does help. What, Mark, is actually wrong with those three starting points? If I think about businesses that I come across in Africa, we have to be honest down here. We don't have a huge culture of corporate venturing. So when we talk about these, these growth units, and you use these examples of, of your Palantirs in the startup community, or we think about, or I don't know, Salesforce Ventures, for example. We think about the venture arms of Microsoft, or what Google's doing with X, and a whole bunch of these, massive brands in the US. There's definitely a culture of pushing the limits and driving extreme innovation and looking beyond the horizon of what's possible. I don't see that in Africa. Why do you think that is, Mark? Because many Fortune 500 companies are copying what Dave's just kind of alluded to there.
Yeah, I mean, I think great question, Colin. I think the first point is that when you're doing this work, you really need to understand the why. So what we find companies that do this well is understanding that this is about driving impact. So there's impact and outcomes. So what is that from? We talk about the from to shift that you're looking to make. So a big client of ours is Goodyear. It's not about just focusing on tires. It's about what comes next. You spoke about Horizon 2 and Horizon 3. So for me in Africa, there's
Do
such
you want to just
amazing
explain
entrepreneurs.
Horizon 2 and Horizon 3 for
So Horizon
anyone that
2
doesn't know
is,
that?
obviously outside of your core business, so understanding what are the opportunities, one or two adjacencies away from the core. What are some of those? Are they new market opportunities? Are they new business model opportunities, etc.? So it's really thinking about where the puck is going. What are some of those opportunities outside of the core? If we go back to Africa, there's a lot of entrepreneurial talent. There's a lot of, we've seen so many wonderful examples. Naspers, go down the list, Standard Bank. There's so many wonderful examples of innovation coming out. The key, though, is to build the muscle and the blueprint, to develop the blueprint, but also more importantly, build the muscle to capitalize on these opportunities, because this is a muscle you need to grow and develop. We believe it's strategic. So there's probably not enough examples of companies really committing to building that muscle in Africa, because you want to be placing bets. This is about placing a series of bets that could be build bets, invest bets, partner bets, buy bets, but you really need to see an investment being built in large companies. And there are wonderful examples. We'll talk about a bit about them later. There are lots of great examples of large corporates that have done this well. But there's a commitment to building this muscle, over the long haul. You can't. This is not a quick. It's not a short-term game. You need to be thinking about how do you build the muscle to place the bets and to explore new territories and domains.
Dave, let's go back to a point that you mentioned earlier, in terms of building these growth units. It sounds like you have a very deliberate process and a set of principles that you believe companies, if they were to enact them, they can copy, and they can actually apply these principles successfully if they do it with diligence and care and focus. So am I getting that right? And if so, what are the basic steps that companies need to go through when they're building these growth units?
You're getting it substantially right, Colin, but we need to be really careful about the word copy. Something that we pride ourselves on is coming up with a within our general template, coming up with a unique plan for growth within every organization we work with. So, for example, every organization we work with needs to decide on the proper mix of organic growth, creating, building, and launching new ventures, and other tools for inorganic growth, investment, partnership, and and mergers and acquisitions, right? And that has to do with the culture of the company and its long-term goals and its strategy and so on. Now, once you have a sense of what's appropriate for the personality and metabolism of a different organization, and I urge everyone listening to this not to just apply, not to just try to graft something or apply something exactly as it's written by Mach 49 or anybody else to your business, because every business, every organization is unique. Then, exactly as you said, we've got a unique set of methods and tools. And so, as a quick example, to be specific, um, notwithstanding some of the customization I just described, if you are going to create, build, and launch a new venture within an organization, there are some things you always have to do. There are groups of people you always have to put together. We call them the new venture board, the new venture team, and the growth advocates from the operating units. there's a general approach that's been validated on program after program after program, and starting by understanding actual problems and needs of human beings, moving on to visualizing a product, and then finally work through the business viability in order to launch a new line of business, for example. Does that help a bit?
Yeah, it does help a bit, and I want to already touch on that bit, but I'll come back to the board and the team. I think that's really, kind of interesting. But in my mind, I just want to really clarify the difference between this kind of venture building, and corporate venturing, and some of these other techniques that corporates are well used to. So the incremental development of products and services, that feels like innovation. It feels like what every company should be doing. Most CEOs, most group CEOs are going to be very well versed in mergers and acquisition. They're going to be knowing that they need to go and purchase and buy, and they're going to have that as a key strategic principle that, to protect themselves, whether it's from the downside or to go and raise for the opportunity. They're going to go and look at geographical expansion. They're going to think about efficiencies. And they're, of course, going to have a bunch of technologists trying to help them to find the kind of latest trends, whether it's AI or whatever, blockchain, that they can sort of, get onto. Why is that not enough? And what exactly is it that your growth unit kind of process does differently? How different is it?
Sure. So the first thing I'll say, just to respond to the first point you made, Colin, is, if anyone who's listening ever hears a business speaker or a business consultant sort of sneer about incremental growth, they don't know what in the heck they're talking about. Incremental growth, steady incremental release of new products and new services, whether you're selling insurance or automobiles or fertilizer, that's an essential part of your business and part of your growth. In fact, I believe the majority of your resources should go into these classic areas of growth. Um, uh, Incremental growth through new product introduction methods, mergers and acquisitions, and so on. Part of what people miss, Colin, when they limit themselves only to those methods of growth, is they miss those opportunities that are several adjacencies away from the core of what they do, that are just so essential to staying relevant in the market and growing. So I just want to invite everyone who's listening to think about an area, an opportunity area that's several adjacencies away from your core. And by adjacency, we can be talking about a new product or service, a new market, a new geography you want to pursue, a new technology you want to embrace, a new go-to-market channel. What we see over and over and over is keys to rapid and disruptive growth have to do with large organizations building that muscle to embrace opportunities that are 2 or 3 adjacencies away. You're in a new country with an entirely new supply chain, and you're embracing a new technology, something like that. That's a key area of growth that is not done very well at all by current large businesses.
Yeah. Colin, can I just add something here? The the thing I see, the mistake that I see happen is people get caught in the trap of binary thinking. For us, these things are not mutually exclusive. I think of them as tools in the toolbox. You can invest in startups, you can set up a CVC, a corporate venture capital unit. You can set up an accelerator, you can do venture clienting, which is working effectively with startups, and you can do acquisitions, but you can also do venture acquisitions. Like you can build a small venture and you can find an adjacent startup and bring the two together. Now you've got a very interesting play. So I think the trap I often see, there are two traps that I see happen. One is this binary thinking of it's either or, and I don't believe that's right. I think these are tools that you can leverage in different ways for different situations. That's point number one. Point number two is there's also quite a focus on the big bets. Companies placing big bets, hydrogen. You spoke about some of the interesting technologies. What venturing is about is a series of small bets because, and once again, we want to look at big bets, but also small bets because this is what gets you into those adjacent opportunities. So thinking about those small bets and building a portfolio of them. Some of them could be ideas you want to build inside your company. Some could be working with a startup because a startup just moves so much quicker and it maybe is so much further ahead. But you want to make sure you're placing those small bets through those tools of build, buy, partner, and invest.
You make it sound like it's kind of obvious that companies should do this, but you did say something earlier which has given me pause to think. And you started describing the fact that you have to have these teams of people. So you mentioned having a specific board and having a specific set of people that are looking at these growth units. The implication there is that you're kind of suggesting if I'm in one side of the business, the core business, I'm not really going to be great at multitasking and trying to go and set up a lot of small bets in a venturing type
Yeah.
format. Is that your experience? Do you ever see examples where one management team can actually do both?
No, that's a great point is you need to build the ambidexterity. So there's obviously the business of today, but then there's a team, a growth engine team that's focusing on the business of tomorrow. We're doing a very exciting project in North Africa where they've done exactly that. So we're setting up a growth engine office team that is focused on build, buy, partner, and invest outside of the core business. It doesn't mean that they're not going to look at opportunities in the core, Horizon 1, but they are very much thinking about Horizon 2 and Horizon 3. Further out, as we said, new business models, new markets, new technologies, new plays. So I'm a big believer in you need to set up an organized team. I've seen different teams combine venture investing and venture building under one unit. Some companies have the venture investing team that's separate from the venture building team, but we see them as the yin and the yang of each other. They really need to work in unison. So either you organize them under one team, you structure them under one team, but either way, they should be working pretty closely together between investing and venture building.
How separate do they have to be, Dave? Because I'd imagine there's a lot of interesting conflicts that are created here. I remember a story I was listening to from Salim Ismail, one of the founding
Sure.
directors of Singularity University. I'm sure you know him well. He's often in LA with his work, and he authored the book Exponential Organizations. Now, he was telling me the story about how when he was trying to set up a growth unit or an equivalent at Yahoo, it was a disaster because although they tried to keep themselves away from the mothership, as soon as they came to purchasing things, as soon as it came to security, office space, the hiring process, the procurement process, there were antibodies everywhere that kind of slowed down the process of what they were trying to do. It feels like a very similar story to others that I've spoken to who've tried to set up growth units. They get
Mhm.
damaged by the antibodies of the mothership.
Mhm. Sure. Salim's a wonderful guy. I helped him edit the book you mentioned, and he was, especially in the early days, he was a good friend of Mach 49. And for some of the reasons you mentioned, Colin, about the challenges of antibodies and corporate immune systems, he brought us into some of the early deals that he worked on where they needed new ventures built. I think one of the key success attributes to avoid the kind of problem you're talking about, where, I mean, I hate to use this word, but the immune system of the mothership effectively poisons or kills startups, internal startups, and internal innovation opportunities without allowing them to thrive.
Mm.
One of the really important, what we call preconditions for success, is to get a commitment from the very top of the organization. This is at least a C-level executive, and most typically it's the CEO, around a precondition for success to lift governance off both the growth engine, the entity within the organization that is propelling these new venture forwards, and also the individual team members in the new venture team. And Colin, here's a sort of classic litmus test is people always talk about wanting to innovate, but if you have a team that's racing forward to pursue some new opportunity in fintech or in synthetic biology or something like that, and when they need to buy something, if they need to buy a $200 laser printer or something like that, if they need to go through a 6 to 8 week purchasing approval process, they're just big company employees. The big company has not done a proper job of lifting governance to allow this new independent entity to keep pace with a rapidly changing market. And I'll tell you, I've never seen a successful alternative to having that mandate come from the very top of the organization, to come from the CEO to lift governance. Otherwise, for completely understandable reasons, the organization, the little startup you're trying to create, is beholden to the existing processes for legal and for accounting and so on.
What's we don't have to mention companies in case maybe it comes out a bit rude, but I can imagine that when you go into companies, a lot of the C-suite have got some perspectives on this, which are ranging from we don't need external support, we can do this ourselves,
Mhm.
and we actually have a number of projects going, let's show you, and they kind of want to bumble on, and they often don't succeed. Two, we love what you're saying, we'd like to set it up, we're super keen, and they set it up and it dies within the first 12 months because they've underestimated the degrees of separation and air cover that need to be given to these types of ventures. CEOs come and go, board members come and go, priorities change, and therefore suddenly this unit, which is sitting there spending money and wasting resources and looks a long, long way away from producing anything of note, is the easiest one to throw out, probably after the marketing budget. How do you deal with that with these senior guys to try to get them really invested in what it takes to build a growth unit?
Yeah, the first thing we do is what I was saying about impact framing is what is the strategic driver of why you're doing this? Obviously you want to place bets and you want to build a portfolio, but the first thing is strategically, what does that roadmap look like? So let's bring it back to Goodyear. What is that? What is a solution outside of tires? Where's mobility heading? Autonomous, robotics, etc. Where's mobility reimagined? So that's a very strategic thing that they're looking to do. So leaders will come and go. Our previous client was Rich Kramer. He was the CEO. He's passed on the baton. That impact roadmap doesn't change. I mean, there might be some strategic tweaks, but they've got that roadmap clearly defined within the organization. And the muscle that they've built a CVC with us. They're doing a lot of venture building in support of that impact roadmap. So I think that to me is very important, is setting the stage with that from to shift that you're looking to make. So if you're a bank in South Africa or in Africa, what is it that you're thinking about the experience economy? How are you getting into the unbanked opportunities across the continent? So we know you're a bank, but what are some of the other bets you should be placing? You look at the US, there's no reason why Chase couldn't have done Stripe Bank. The Stripe opportunity is a startup that's, really disrupted things. There's no reason why a large company couldn't have done that. There's so many examples of that. So once again, leaders come and go, but you want to make sure that this work is connected to the strategic impact that the company is looking to make 5, 10 years out. And
Okay.
then obviously the final thing is finding leaders that have a growth mindset, because this doesn't work if you have a fixed mindset and you don't have a growth mindset. Then it becomes a binary conversation. Focus on my knitting, focus on my core business. But we want leaders to have a growth mindset because that's their responsibility. They should be thinking about how to create accretive growth in the organization. So that growth mindset is important.
Let's ask a percentage, Dave. You don't have to answer it. It's obviously, this isn't a scientific question, but it feels like there's only a minority of CEOs and leadership teams that have got the courage and conviction and courageousness to embark on these type of growth units. I'm imagining it's in the less than 10, less than 20% type category. Is that unfair?
I think it's too low, Colin. I think there's increasing recognition across executive teams in every vertical market in every country of the world I've worked with, that growth tools for growth beyond the traditional tools that we've been talking about are essential. So if you force me to guess, I'd say right now the number of corporations committed to new approaches to growth is 30% and growing. But let me give you a more important statistic. In any large organization anywhere in the world, 100% of those large organizations have the right people and the right capabilities in-house to grow in entirely new ways, to create, build, and launch new ventures. Mark and I have never worked with any organization in any vertical market in any country from any culture that couldn't come up with exciting and innovative new ways to grow.
That is interesting. Mark, do you think that's 30% when you look outside of America? I mean, if you're looking in Silicon Valley and most major hubs within the US, I'd have thought the numbers, quite significantly higher than 30% in my mind. I've just got entrepreneurs everywhere. Maybe I'm reading the wrong types of magazines. But Mark, what do you see outside of the US?
Yeah, I mean, I think you obviously probably have to separate the digitally native hyperscalers versus the traditional laggards, like the traditional industries that are facing disruption.
Like
Obviously,
my old industry, let's be clear, like banking, for example.
yeah. No, I mean, I do see a lot of accelerators. I see a lot of corporate venture capital. I haven't seen as much venture building because there's still a belief that startups can do this quicker than an internal venture team. So I think what you would see in banking is more of a focus on accelerators, but I think it's definitely north of 30% when you think of, a lot of them have got CVC units, they've been around. You're going to be talking to Standard Chartered Ventures. They're doing a phenomenal job with their CVC, but they also have done a phenomenal job with building a venture unit that's building and launching very exciting ventures within. So the typical, the percentage comes down when you combine venture building and venture investing, but definitely north of 40% on the accelerator and venture investing side for sure.
Can you
But
just
we are
quickly
seeing, to
explain
Dave's
venture
point,
building, Mark? Just because
yeah,
you've mentioned it a couple of times and we didn't really dig into it
yeah.
when Dave explained it right at the start. Just for clarity, what exactly is venture building and how does it differ to the normal innovation work that guys are doing?
Yes. So for us, venture building is about taking an idea or developing an idea and really finding some wonderful entrepreneurial talent with inside a large company. You heard from Dave, the new venture team, and putting this team together and running them through what we would term incubation, which is a 12-week process to really test out this concept and turn it into a new business. So think of it as a startup with inside a large corporate. So if you're a bank in Africa, how can you take talented entrepreneurial folks, put them on a cool idea that you're very excited about, and test this in market? We are big. This is probably the most important thing is we are big believers in being led by the customer. So like if the three of us were to start a company, what is the first thing we're going to do? We're going to take our idea and we're going to test that with customers. We're going to get to speak to as many customers as possible. We're going to understand their pain, and then we're going to test potential solutions with those customers. And it's the same principle. It's really taking this small team, 2, 3 folks, obviously, and giving them the support they need to truly validate this concept in market, and then leverage all the amazing advantages that a large corporate in Africa or globally has: marketing, channel, technology, customers, brand, etc. So that's what venture building for us is that first process of taking a concept, not thinking about 400 slides, taking the concept, taking it into market, testing it with real customers. And then obviously, as you've incubated, you've got strong signal that customers are excited about this new solution. There's obviously a journey that follows on with that. We talk about accelerate and then scale, but that really is what venture building is about. Thinking of it as a creative new line of business, but really testing it in market and setting it up as a startup from the get-go, right out of the gates.
Awesome. Fritz, come join the conversation. I think you got a question there.
Yeah, thank you, Colin. Mark, just a question on the process. I put a question forward in the panel. It says, is the growth mindset for corporations limited to the understanding of the process to build and launch new ventures?
Sorry, I'm not clear on the question. Is it limited to
the understanding of the process? So, for instance, if a corporation were to bring in outside talent to look at how they can build and launch new ventures, do you think that's limited to the understanding of what that process is? So, you're starting to look at areas of empathy, looking at customer journeys. Do you agree with that statement I'm making now?
Well, I think growth mindset I think that's part of a growth mindset. I think to me, growth mindset is broader because it's sort of, do executives really believe in the importance of placing bets outside of their core business? And are they
limited, Mark? Mark, I think are they limited by the skill sets that they have to turn on internally? I think that's where the question's going. I've got a growth mindset. I want to do these amazing things, but I've actually got no one in my team that understands UX or lean or any of the kind of startup models, and I get stuck.
Yeah, no, they could be. I mean, that is one of the limiting factors for sure. Like, do they have the right talent? Do they have enough entrepreneurial talent? I mean, I challenged a client in North Africa. They said to me, they've got lots of folks working on this. I mean, there's hundreds of people. So there is the entrepreneurial talent. Where they get it wrong is you need to make sure they're the right methodology. So there's no shortcuts. We often have, and I've had discussions with African companies where they've built stuff and they're quite excited about it. They want to spin it out and they want to create this new unicorn. But then you test them and you say, well, have you validated this with customers outside of your business or your business units? And they haven't. So methodology matters in this game. So it is about talent. Yes. It is about an investment in methodology. It is a commitment to patient capital, because the other mistake we see happen is companies have short-term focuses, quarterly earnings. They're not thinking for the long term. And this does require putting patient capital to work to build up a CVC or a corporate venture capital unit and to set up a growth engine. So I think it's a combination of investing appropriately in the money, investing in the talent. What is a good opportunity with these vehicles is that it's a wonderful opportunity to bring in talent. But we've seen this. If you bring in talent, you need to be open to, let's say you're setting up a corporate venture capital unit. I guarantee you the conversation at some point is going to come around, hey, can we get carry on the fund? Often corporates will look at that and go, hey, we pay employees, we have standard compensation. How can we be paying our CVC unit carry on the fund? But it's standard practice in Silicon Valley and globally. So you have to have an open mind, and that goes back to that growth mindset. If you're attracting this wonderful talent, this entrepreneurial talent, you need to think differently on how you're going to compensate and incentivize this talent. The same thing for entrepreneurs working on new ventures. Are you going to give them a phantom share scheme? Are you going to give them funds? How are you going to incentivize them on this journey? Because when these things reach escape velocity and get exciting, I guarantee you they're also going to have that conversation and say, hey, where's my skin in the game? I want to see some upside. So growth mindset is in being open to all of those conversations and thinking intentionally through the implications of how we're going to think about compensation, incentives, communication, attracting and retaining talent. But yes,
tell me what, Mark, you mentioned carry on fund. That's technical. What does that mean?
The what, sorry?
Carry on fund. When you're talking about compensation, just quickly explain for everyone what carry on fund is.
Oh, so getting carry is obviously getting upside on the fund's performance. So, outside of obviously getting your salary, if the fund returns X amount of value, you're going to get a percentage as a team on that return. So that's what carry is. Which you can imagine in a corporate is, hey, how can the guys in the unit be making more than some senior executive? Well, if you want to attract and retain talent and you want to get good performance on your CVC, why not? So
all right, well, let's dive into that because, Dave, I've got a question here from Simba. It's a great question. I want to get to it, but let's go through it. So we now know that we've got a different board. Okay, and I now know that the people I've got in this are kind of segregated from the mothership, and we're going to pay them differently. The next question I've got, Dave, is do we want different people? You said earlier that, every corporation has got people within it that can come and do corporate venturing. Do you recommend they employ from within and transfer guys out from their day jobs and focus on this fully time? Or do you recommend that they have a mix of internal and new external hires?
Yeah, it's an astute question. And our strong preference is to make internal hires and and this is often tough, high potential people who sometimes have one foot out the door because they're frustrated working in large organizations are incredibly good candidates for new venture teams. Two things, Colin. First of all, if these people are inside the organization, that should absolutely be your first choice. It often, like I said, it often takes a CEO mandate because the sort of people that thrive and really deliver on new ventures, working to select people with these huge companies we work with like TDK and Standard Bank and so on. They're also typically essential to the day-to-day operation of the bank. They're really good at what they do. Now, so we have a set of attributes that we go through, and time won't permit me to go into all of them, but there are both personality profiles, behaviors that we look for, and work experience that we look for in successfully choosing someone to be a member of a new venture team. Now, all that said, a good new venture team is 3 to 5 people. Sometimes even in a 100,000, 200,000 person company, you can't find all 5. And in that case, what Mach 49 always does is to support our clients in hiring, often on contract, somebody from the outside to step in and play the role of, say, the go-to-market specialist, or
Mm.
even the team lead, like the CEO in residence of a new internal startup. Does that help a bit?
Yeah, that does help a bit, and actually maybe now's a good time, perhaps Taylor, if you can put the link in at some point before we close the call for the Unicorn Within, the book that your CEO, is it Linda Yates, wrote. They've got very good pieces in there exactly on the types of people that you should be looking to employ in growth units, the skill sets, and that kind of forensic process to go through. It's definitely not, from my understanding, just choosing people on a whim because you're mates with them and you think they're a good person. Okay, you've now set this up, and I will get to you similar. I think you're the question after this one. You're now set up, you've got your people that are chosen. The next area of conflict, which strikes me from personal experience as being very real and very likely to happen, is just an outright jealousy. Because when you see people going into this is the glossy place to be. This is where you're going to be part of the, the social context of dealing with the people from Uber and meeting the guys from Google and flying off to go and get immersed in San Francisco. And you get these incredible experiences when you go in, at least it's perceived, you get incredible experiences when you go in and try to set up these growth units. How do you deal with that? Because there's a lot of people that are sitting there going, either A, I'm jealous, I want to be there, or B, what a waste of time. We've seen this before. This is just a waste of money.
That's what Dave was talking about, the growth advocate. So you don't want to create the cool kids and the not cool kids. So, there's people that can contribute to the growth engine from all the units across the company. Not everybody has that growth mindset. Not everyone is naturally a growth advocate. But that's why in the design of these growth engines, you need to be thinking about finding those folks in procurement, in legal, in HR, in marketing, in operations that really see the value of this, that want to lean in and contribute to the success of these new ventures. So, in legal, we don't want a 60-page term sheet. We want a 1-page term sheet, so it's finding those growth advocates because they exist. And that's what we refer to as seizing the mothership advantage. That's what's going to give any startup or new venture success, is getting all this amazing support from across the organization when you need it. And you obviously need it in quick time. So I think it's making sure you take those people on the journey, and that's why communication is so important, both internally and externally, is how do you get these folks identified and excited to lean in on this effort. So it really is, that's probably the most underlooked team or piece within this whole puzzle, are the growth advocates in any large organization.
Yeah. Let me build on that a little, Colin, because Colin, I think you asked a great question, which is about envy and jealousy. It's something we need to deal with. Envy and jealousy have been around, judging from ancient literature, from the dawn of time, and they're present. So to your point, we cannot have it. We cannot have people envious and jealous of people who were chosen for a new venture team when they were not chosen. How do you prevent that? Communication
Yeah, I'm
about
glad that you're answering that, Dave, because my heart went to my stomach and I was thinking, you're not expecting me. Please answer your own question.
yeah, answer it right now, Colin. I'm waiting. So, no, it's this is a fundamental it's an unhealthy but fundamental human tendency to be jealous. What do you do? The single best advice I can give to the listeners on this chat is you must never position internal entrepreneurship and internal venture building as an innate talent that people either have or do not have. You must position it from the very top of the organization as a learnable skill, or a little more precisely, as a discrete set of entirely learnable, approachable skills. That's why at Mach 49, we always send a message that we're building capability, not building some sort of dependence. The message that everyone in the organization is, my message to you as a new employee, Colin, might be, yeah, you didn't get chosen for this one, but understand these are learnable skills, and here's a path you can take to learn what you need to know to be eligible for the next incubation.
And it gives me confidence and hope that it can be dealt with. I note that you're an engineer by
Absolutely.
background and trade, so with process, maybe that's manageable. Simba, you had a great question. I think now is the appropriate time.
Thank you so much, Colin. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Dave. Really appreciating the discussion. My question was around essentially, I guess, what you could call the go-to-market of a sort of corporate venture building initiative. And really, it's two parts. The first being, what do you think is a reasonable runway to give a new idea within a corporate? That would be part one. And then part two, in relation to testing in the market, do you think that the idea of piloting with other corporates and testing whether there is actually solution there is something that's plausible and you've seen done in your experiences?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, Simba. Let's combine both of those two questions. So for us, we believe incubation is 12 weeks. Probably give it 3 weeks for preparation. You should be getting to a fundable business plan and a concept that is ready to take out into the market for customer pilots. You should be already from week 1 of those 12 weeks to week 9 be testing with customers. And that's why we refer to it as customer development. So you should be testing, having those conversations with customers to identify potential pilot customers from those customers that you've been speaking to. And you're testing value propositions, you're learning about their pain. So that to us is 12 weeks to get it to a fundable business plan. And then in Accelerate, which comes after incubation, obviously it differs if it's B2B or B2C, and if it's hardware versus software. Hardware takes longer to test through pilots, obviously. You're probably looking at 9 months of sort of build to validate at least. If it's software, it's a lot quicker. You can probably get there from 6 to 9 months of really working with those pilot customers to test if there's product market fit, if the solution is really resonating. But the second part of your question, what is key is you actually want to be developing those customers right from the beginning, because those are your future customers. If you can convert them from being pilot customers to paying customers, that's a win. You want to get as many of those as possible. So I think those are the timelines. 12 weeks, give or take, on incubation. Acceleration is an additional 6 to 9 months of really getting it to build to validate. And then obviously it continues. And then you can plot sort of seed, Series A, Series B, like any other startup in Silicon Valley would go on.
Now that's fantastic. 10 to 12 weeks sounds really cool. But that, in my opinion, isn't where things go wrong. I mean, it could be the starting point of where things go wrong, but at that moment in the 10 to 12 weeks, you've planned it properly, you've brought in the right people, you've moved in, there's lots of hoo-ha, maybe there's been a town hall, everyone's got very excited about this, okay? Usually the problems seem to come 2 or 3 years later, because after that excitement, nothing has happened, and people forget that it takes 10 years to be an overnight success. And my understanding is it's exactly the same when you're doing corporate venture building. You can have some really interesting products and services, but then when it comes to scaling them and getting people to buy it and pay money, and then you're having to pivot multiple times, people seem to lose focus on the journey, and that's where, in my assessment, it goes wrong. Am I right? And how do you deal with that, Dave?
You're absolutely right. No part of this is easy, but the part that's extraordinarily tough happens when the incubate that Mark just described is complete and you're actually moving into the pilot stage with pilot customers and exposing your new business to the messy realities of the actual marketplace. The first thing I will say, back to the teams that we talked about and the sort of nature of a new venture team, Colin, is part of the issue is you've got to choose people for your new venture team that have grit and have guts and will not back down in the face of the natural challenges and road bumps and problems and obstacles that they run into. As a guy who's now been part of 3 different startups, I can tell you that if we weren't all committed to the vision, if we weren't all that sort of person, we would have given up before we actually saw success. The single metric I can give you around the biggest odds for success once you're at that point, you know, to your point, when you're spending a year, 2 years, 3 years, steadily building your new pilot business, Colin, is if if the new venture has been built on a deep and empathetic understanding of who the customers actually are and exactly what problems need to be solved, and if they're willing to allow the market to speak to them and appropriately pivot their way along to adjust what the offer is, that's the single most important metric of success I've seen for these businesses that helps you propel you past that 2 or 3 years. We have a business that we worked with Schneider Electric to create called Navix. They're currently looking at a $400 million US sales pipeline 3 years into their evolution, which is really, really important. I believe they got there for two reasons. They got there because they have a deep understanding of the people who manage data centers, and they got there because of their commitment to be continuously informed by everything they learned from their 5 pilot customers and to tune their product market fit based on what they've learned.
That's lovely. Hilda, if you want to ask your question, and then I think after that one, Bianca, I'll come to you because that's also a great question. Hilda, you're on.
Good to see you, Hilda.
You're on
you're
mute.
While we wait for Hilda, I'll ask Bianca's question. So, does the 9-to-1 failure rate still loom over new ideas and launches? So, I think we know what that one means in terms of success rates. If I look at the startup community and I think about Sequoia or the top VCs,
Yeah.
roughly speaking, their top companies are in the 5 to 6% bucket. And the difference between them and other VCs is that when they hit big, they really hit big. I mean, they get 100,000 time multiples against their competition. And so the rest of their portfolio, many of them, 40–50% kind of go out of business or they kill them. And actually the mentality in it is to kill them. And I think that's really interesting. In a corporate space, you don't often have that mentality to kill. And I don't know what the stats are in terms of the percentages of success. Can you add some light into that?
Yeah, so no, exactly right. So for corporate venture capital, like Sequoia and Andreessen, they only need a few to return the value on the fund, but they're looking at thousands and thousands of startups to then filter, invest in 10, and they need 2, and then you've seen some of the success. Corporate venture capital is different. We've seen tremendous success at Mach 49 because of this maniacal focus. Let's bring it back to your maniacal, Colin.
I love
back
it.
to really being led by the customer, because we can't afford to waste time. We can't afford to place bets on things we haven't really tested signal with true customers, paying customers. But yes, sometimes you do have to kill things. We advise clients to kill things. So yes, that is a very important skill set, is not just continuing this pet project for 2 years if there isn't good signal. You do have to learn to kill things for sure. But I think the success for us is far greater because of this real intensity of focusing on what customers want and how we can adjust and pivot the solution based on what they really need. And that's where we see a far higher success rate and a commitment to the fact that this is a journey. You said it beautifully. Rome wasn't built in a day. You've got to play the long game on this. This is about building interesting portfolio over time, and that does take time. So you need a commitment to that journey. So
I think
corporates see the strategic value of that journey.
I think you make a good point, Mark, on continuing to listen actively for market signals, which we're committed to. The other thing I want to say about our success rate, which is better than the success rate you'd see even at a tier 1 venture fund like Andreessen Horowitz, is this. Large companies have a certain startup envy sometimes. They sort of say, well, we could never do that. And in fact, what's hilarious for me, having worked at 3 different startups, is things are so screwed up at these huge startups. You don't have any of the resources that huge companies do. Large Global 1000 companies have supply chain, internal expertise, delivery channel, remarkable brand, internal product, intellectual property. We didn't have any of those things at startups. And the thing is, properly harnessed, the assets and the capabilities of these huge corporations provide a huge strategic advantage and a huge improvement in the odds of success for startups created by large companies as opposed to startups created from the ground up in Silicon Valley or Cape Town or anywhere else?
Ben, it's a great question. I don't think I can answer that one, and I'm sure Mark and Dave will hold their opinions to themselves. But if there's other people on the call who have an opinion about what Standard Bank are doing in this space, I'd also love to hear it. I think it would be fascinating. So, and we can always follow up on this later. It's a great question. I just don't think we can go into that now. When I think, Dave, about corporate ventures, in fact, innovation for any company in any situation, one of the biggest factors that gets in the way is choice. And you kind of erred to it that corporates actually have a lot of choice, even though they don't know it. They envy the Silicon Valley startups. They've got no choice. These guys come in and they're so focused and they get such tight amounts of money to go and play with, and they just go focus, pivot, focus. But in large corporates, you get massive choice. You've got huge balance sheet. You've got resources everywhere. You've got distribution that startups could only dream of. You've got partners in place where you can just pick and choose who you want to deal with. And that could be the death of any good idea, because what's the process to get you focused on an idea and then to help you to be really laser-like in terms of delivering it, testing it, pivoting, and going through the standard, product build cycle?
Yes. So you're asking sort of a two-part question. How do you choose the idea, and then how do you keep people focused on the idea? And both those are terribly important, Colin. How do you choose an idea? We spend entire days on what we like to call portfolio review. Again, using terms and methods and tools that we see from successful venture capitalists. But the quick answer is, it's very important up front for ideas to be put on what we like to call a level playing field, right? The first thing corporations need to do is to decide, do they have too many ideas? Do they need to go through a portfolio review and evaluate each potential idea in terms of customer desirability and business viability, and not in terms of who presented the idea and how senior that person is, right? Because that's not what you want to worry about. Other organizations, for example, don't have enough ideas. They've got a dearth of ideas, and in those cases, you might, for example, run a venture plan competition where you teach people to write simple business plans and select the winners. This is something we did, for example, with our client TDK, and they've launched successful new ventures, public ventures, based on that. As we talked about a little earlier, once you go through this critical transition point, once you've looked at your portfolio of new ideas, once you've done a venture competition, once you've selected one or two or three ventures that are the start of that portfolio, which should ultimately be, between 10 and 20 ventures for a healthy portfolio. Then, as we talked about earlier, you need to lift governance. If possible, you need to put the 3 to 5 person new venture team in a physically separate space so that they show up at work and they spend all day, every day, thinking about the single problem that they're focused on without the distraction of their grinding day-to-day operational abilities. The last thing I'll say there is, it's always a good thing to be honest and unsentimental with yourself about things you got wrong in your career and mistakes you made. Earlier in my career, I was a director at a design innovation firm called IDEO, and I believed, and I was wrong, that disruptive innovation and disruptive new ventures can be built entirely within an organization. I no longer believe that. I think that's a recipe for failure. I think you need to pull people culturally, physically, and emotionally out of the organization in order to keep them focused.
One thing, can I just add on choice quickly?
Go.
Yeah, just something on choice that you got me thinking, bringing it back to the growth engine, building the growth engine. Remember, you've also got the choice to, let's say you've incubated for 12 weeks. What we find with some clients is you realize, look, it's just going to take us a month of Sundays to build this thing. But there's a startup we found in the ecosystem that's doing something very similar, but now we've been informed by the customer. Instead of us trying to build this, let's invest in the startup or buy the startup, wrap around the startup, because they're just going to accelerate. So I loved your point, Colin, on choice, because it's not just, Dave explained the build process beautifully, but it's also choice of, okay, let's build it to this point in the journey. Remember, it's a journey. Now let's partner with this company. Let's invest in this company. Let's buy this adjacent startup to really accelerate it. So you have choices you can make at every point along the milestones. At week 9, week 10, there's so many different choices you can make, and if we take it back to why we wanted to do this conversation around the growth engine is. That's why you want to build this muscle so that you can act on these things in different ways at appropriate times. Sometimes it is better to partner. Sometimes it is better to buy versus invest versus build. So you want to build that muscle so you can exercise that choice.
All right, last 2 things and then we close. The first is, I think it's already been put into the chat. Watch out. I'll email you all about it anyway because you've registered for this event, but the SC Ventures story, this is Standard Chartered. I'm really looking forward to it. A big thanks to Gadeep for agreeing to join us. I'm hoping that Mark or Dave or someone from Act 49 will join me. I don't want to be all lonely. I'm thinking 2 against 1. We can really pepper him with questions and get the insights that we really want. And I hope all of you that have enjoyed this call will join us too. It's going to be a different time because they're in the UK, so we've set it around lunchtime. Another reason I want Mark or Dave to join, because that would be super early for those guys. That's my anyway. That's the first thing. The second thing is I just want Dave to run through the course that we're hoping to bring to South Africa in somewhere around May, June. Do you want to just explain the masterclass, because I think it sounds amazing?
Sure. So in the second quarter of this year, the date is to be determined. We'll be in South Africa to teach a masterclass on exactly the methods that we're describing here. And when I say masterclass, what I'm talking about is a program where all the attendees bring with them a current initiative that they have in their organization. It might be embracing AI. It might be entering a new market. It might be making your business greener and more sustainable, for example. And step by step, in an action-focused, exercise-focused 2-day masterclass, we step through the key methods of venture building and venture investing, and everyone who attends walks away with the rudiments of a go-forward plan on how to create growth in an entirely new way in your organization. So please join us. The date will be announced, and we are really looking forward to seeing everyone and really, really excited about the potential of the sub-Saharan African market generally and the South African market specifically.
Thanks for that, Dave. And who should be interested in that? Is this really just for people working in massive multinational listed corporates? Is it for people working in small startups, 100, 200 people, or even consultants? Does it not matter?
Colin, we've provided great experiences for everyone from people working for Global 1000 companies to people from startups to people working in government agencies. We had great success employing exactly these methods with a California state government agency called State Fund, for example. So if growing in new ways is important to you, join us.
Awesome. I think we're coming to the close. Mark, we'll give you the last word.
Yeah, this is about courage. I would love to encourage you all to challenge your teams, your organizations to take the next step. This is about really, talk is cheap. You need to get out there and you need to take some of those bold steps, those ideas that you have in your top drawer that have been sitting there for a while, or a coffee stopper on your desk. Take those ideas, shake them off, and test them and get them into market. So that's where change happens, is take that next step.
With that, everyone who joined us, thank you very much. If you've left reviews or comments, that's great. If you want to email me, phone me, WhatsApp me, we can make that happen as well. If you've got questions you want to put back to Mark and Dave, we can do that. If you're interested in the course, you've got colleagues that are interested in the course, obviously reach out and we'll provide more details. Most importantly, we hope to see you on March the 19th with Standard Chartered Ventures to get into the detail from some of the practitioners, particularly good if you're into financial services as well. So with that, thanks everyone, and good night.